Okay, councillors, staff and members of the gallery, can I please call upon Councillor O'Connor to read the civic affirmation?
We, as councillors of the Armidale region, declare that we will undertake the duties of the office of councillor in the best interests of our community and faithfully and impartially carry out the functions, powers, authorities and discretions vested in us to the best of our skill and judgment.
Thank you, Councillor O'Connor. And Councillor Robinson, if you could also read the recognition to traditional owners.
You've got it there. Oh, sorry.
Recognition of traditional owners. We acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land and pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. The Armidale Regional Community pays tribute to their love of land, love of people and love of culture. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Robinson. And now I'll call on the General Manager to make a statement regarding live streaming. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The meeting is being audio and video recorded, and the recordings of the non-confidential parts of the meeting will be made available on the internet. No other persons are permitted to record the meeting unless specifically authorised by Council to do so, and could all mobile phones and computers be set to silent, please? Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. General Manager. And I have received one apology from Councillor O'Brien, who won't be joining this meeting today. And I also note that the Mayor is joining us remotely today. Could you just please say hello, Mr. Mayor? There we go. He's online. So we have 10 councillors here today for the meeting. Having reviewed the agenda, do any councillors need to declare any conflict of interest? No. So we'll move into the meeting. Item 9.1, which is the public exhibition of the operational plan and budget for 2024 to 2025. The purpose of this report is to endorse for public exhibition these draft documents, which are required to be prepared under the integrated planning and reporting framework for the second year of the delivery program 2022 to 2026. The draft documents recommended for public exhibition are the draft operational plan and budget 24-25, which includes the operational and capital budgets, the draft revenue policy 2024 to 25, and the draft fees and charges schedule for 24 to 25. For this meeting, the attachments have been combined with the agenda, and the details of this item are available from page 5 of the agenda. We can see the recommendation on screen, which also includes a reservation of $500,000 to cover funds requested by an administrator for the New England Weeds Authority, should one be appointed by the Office of Local Government. Do I have a mover for this? Councillor Witters. And a seconder, Councillor Gadders. Councillor Witters.
Yes. Talk about the forgotten child of what this meeting's all about. You know, this meeting, the extraordinary council meeting for this date, was originally set out for the budget. One of the most operational plans, revenue policies, draft fees and charges and schedules, all that sort of stuff. Some of the most important documents on what a council does, to be endorsed to go out to public exhibition. I want you to remember that. We've got to spend time looking at these things, looking at what's important, looking at stuff that affects the whole community. Not bits and pieces, not subsections, not factions or anything else like that. These sorts of things. So I'll reserve my right, but I'm going to, if I need to come back for a reply. But I really want the community to have a look at these documents, send in their written submissions. It's the only way we can get your thoughts on it. And has been mentioned before, I think over the last couple of years, we've really shown in our plans and budgets that we are a can-do council. And I think with your assistance in the community, we can continue to do so. So please have a look at these things and write in your submissions. And I reserve my right of reply.
Thank you, Councillor Witters and Councillor Gadders.
Thank you, Councillor Witters. I totally agree with you. The purpose of today was an extraordinary council meeting to focus on the budget. This is a very important part of the annual cycle, and we need to make sure that it goes out to public exhibition. We gain any support or needs or feedback from the community, and then we can move it forward in a timely manner for the new financial year. So in that vein, I guess this budget, we're very much still in the journey of Restore and Thrive. There are, for those that do take the opportunity to look at the budgets, there is obviously a lot of information here. I same as Councillor Witters, suggest that try to get a look at these, see what the headlines are. The fact is, or the reality is, when you come to budgeting, there is no perfect answer. The pie is only so big, and you need to do what you can and prioritise what you can along the way. So it's not necessarily going to be everyone's cup of tea, but it's the majority of the community's cup of tea that we're focused on here. So thanks to everyone that's brought it together. The staff has worked very hard. The council have worked very hard in terms of different various workshops along the lines for this too. So thank you, and please make your submissions.
Thank you, Councillor Gadders. Councillor Robinson?
Well, if I can get a seconder, I would like to make a couple of slight amendments, two relating to procedures, and maybe if they're shown on the screen, I'll see if anybody wants to second them. That was one was, well, shall I explain what they are first, and then we find out if I can get a seconder?
Yes, please.
One was in relation to the New England Weeds Authority. We've already, the existing D comment allows for a restricted internal restriction of $500,000 just in case it's needed. But I would also like to allow the general manager, just in case it seems to be a more sensible option, simply to make that a loan at commercial interest rates rather than a grant, because I think that might be the best way to make sure that the Weeds Authority keeps on its feet and actually is economically responsible. The second point and the third point were basically, having looked at all the documents, I still think that we need to manage water better. And this is a very, very small tweak, which I think will make it fairer for the 90% of people who use less than half the water, compared with the 10% who use the other half. We should be favouring the majority, the 90%, and they should be the ones who are at the moment crying out for cost of living relief. And this is one way of doing it. And for the uncontaminated garden waste, this is just basically because we declared a climate emergency. And we should honour that by saying, you know, giving a strong message to the community, that a strong and powerful message that we should not be burning stuff, we should be keeping it, because we should be retaining it in whatever we can, because it's a really important issue that we don't increase global warming. And the other two are basically simply procedural matters that, as we've said, and the problem's coming time and time again, that council are not getting information in a timely manner. And that's why we have to sort of have big discussions about the rail trail and big discussions about other things. And if we don't like things, then we end up sending them back, and it causes an awful lot more to and froing in the long run. And really, we do not want to do this with the budget and the operational plan. So let's see what the community submissions are as they come in. It would be so much more sensible and so much more efficient. And also, I know that I was quite surprised that, in fact, the first time I saw the operational plan was a few days ago. And I've not had any patch-up, and I don't think any other councils had any opportunity to find out what the changes are, what the differences are, what has happened since the previous operational plan, what hasn't worked and what has worked, and why we've dropped things that were in previous operational plans and delivery programs, and why the targets are there or aren't there. And that would really, really help councils' deliberations in future. So if I can get a seconder, I will move that motion and speak to it.
Do we have a seconder?
Not just yet.
Okay.
Mr Chair, I would like to ask a question of the proponent, please, whether in respect of E, the proponent is talking about an increase to the third tier, being the highest consumption tier, or across all tiers?
Well, what I've done is I've left it to the discretion of staff. It could be either, and it could be we could have a discussion or a very, very quick workshop. The main thing is that we would need to increase consumption charges. If we freeze the access charge, then we need to increase total consumption charges by 1.78%, which is fairer than a 4% increase in the access charge. But I'm happy to leave it to council staff as to how they distribute that increase, because I could provide numbers, but then there'd be disagreement. But if we give council staff the power to do whatever they think is in the best interests, then I'd be happy with that.
Does that clarify?
Mr. Chair, I'll second the motion. The amendment.
Okay, so we have an amended motion on the table here. Do we have any debate about the amended motion?
I'll help you out here. As the mover, I agree with to have the debate on the amendment. So if anyone wants to talk about it, that's fine. Because just so we can get the chat out, because as the mover, whether I agree with the amendment or not needed to be asked, and I'll agree with having the chat.
Thanks, Councillor Witters, for your grace.
Can I have a dig?
Councillor Gillespie.
I don't mind D. I don't like these surprises with bringing this stuff in a bit and changing it with your E, F and G and H and stuff like that. I'm happy to support D, but I most definitely won't be supporting the others just to start the conversation. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Gillespie. Councillor McMichael.
I am not sure about the difference between D and what we proposed. I'm happy to be advised by the staff. I have problems with G. I appreciate the spirit of it, but I believe that the staff get public submissions and they have a lot to do, and I believe they collect them all up, look at them, and they are gracious enough to give us an idea of what the public submissions do. And although we were given a huge amount of papers last month, I don't think that was due to public submissions. I think that's a different reason, and I don't think making the staff give us public submissions each time they come in is very helpful.
Thank you, Councillor McMichael. Councillor Gadders.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, this entire item is about our annual budget and operational plans going forward. So I'm not really inclined to change the motion that we had in play, which was actually alive already. In terms of E and F, I think they are great items for a submission once this gets out to public submission. Similar to myself, it's similar to Councillor McMichael. G to me is a little bit like stopping an election halfway through, checking where the votes are at, and then finding out the answer and then tilting the scales and continuing. I think that's probably not the best process to go through. So I don't agree with all of those in whole, no.
Thanks, Councillor Gadders. I think it would also be fair, maybe, to ask the General Manager if he's got any comments about this, which appears to be a bit of policy on the run.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, well, that would probably have been my comment. It does really resemble policy on the run. I think without any, I'm not too sure when these were all circulated and who's seen them, but the staff certainly haven't seen them. And I think to be sort of trying to narrow down percentages or use financial figures that haven't been workshopped, that we don't know what the impact on the budget might be, is probably, I think, would be irresponsible to do that, because and what if, for instance, we apply that 1.78 and it turns out that we're actually making a loss in water and sewer, then what do? We knowing that we have to actually make profits. or we're legislated to make profit across, well, to cover costs at the very least and generate small revenues or small profits in across water and sewer. So to use your term, I would consider it policy on the run and probably not a good use of our time. Thanks.
Thank you.
If I can help, this was released to us councillors at 2:09 p.m. before the meeting. So, as I said, these little surprises I'm not very happy with.
Thank you. Is there any other comments on?
Yep.
Yeah. Councillor
Question to the proponent of the amendment, Councillor Robinson. As this, at the moment where the process is to put it out on public submission, are you proposing that these go out with the public submission, or, as is your right as a council when they come back and we vote on this, to then put these, if they go out on public submission based on the comments of it, put them into the actual document, or take them out, or take these down now and bring them back when it comes to time to adopt papers? What are your thoughts? Whereabouts are you?
Well, quite frankly, I think the important thing is to consider equity. And we know that this didn't happen during our workshops. There was without actually saying what happened in those workshops, it did seem to me that certain people were just being dictated to. And to my mind, and I think the idea really is that, you know, the motion for the water charge just simply says raise the same amount of money. My estimate is that would be 1.78% based on council's predictions. But if council comes up with a slightly different number, it's still, the principle is there that we've had increases in the access charge, which is the one that everybody has to pay whether they're profligate users or not. And we know from last year that 90% of users use only 50% of the water and 10% use the rest of it. And the millions and millions of dollars we're spending on water infrastructure is to pay for more and more water. And if some of the people were more, less profligate, maybe we'd be able to save a fair bit of money. And this is the sort of thing we should be looking at. Now, this is a very, very small thing. It's just saying, you know, we've gone far enough. We do not want any further increases. And this may not be the sentiment of council, but if it is, we should vote for it now and have the document changed. But if not, we can have the same discussion possibly when the submissions come in. And the other thing is, as I said, I saw the operational plan and wondered where all the things in it that were in previous operational plans that haven't been completed. We all agreed on them before. We've never seen this plan before. And now suddenly they're all dropped, and some of the targets and other things are also dropped. And have we seen it? Why should we not have any consultation before it goes out in public exhibition? Because then it means there's a terrible, terrible rush to, and possibly that's always going to happen, but at least we could see some of those submissions beforehand. It's not really, it encourages community engagement. So if some people have great ideas, then other people can look at them and say, yeah, that's a wonderful idea. It's the way of getting the whole community together instead of dividing them. So that was really why I would really like to see better procedures. And sooner or later they will come, but it's up to this council whether it decides that these ideas are good now or not. And we'll have another discussion later if not.
Thanks, Councillor Robinson.
Yeah, I've got a question for the staff through the General Manager, probably. When this comes back from public submission, if a lot of public submissions are put in, then this will change. But without this amendment, the document may change. There might be a few tweaks and things based on public submission from there. What impact on rechanging, if this was put out, if this amendment was put out to public, council could then still strike it if it didn't match the public submissions and where it sits again, or does it have to stay in the documents when it comes back if this amendment's passed today? Does that question make sense? Does council have the ability to remove this in the final report if needed?
I want to try and answer your question, if I've understood it correctly. So can we just clarify? Are you asking if the amendment's adopted, the charges are changed, and the 1.78% applied, goes out on public exhibition, there's feedback? What then? Was that the question?
It's based on the feedback and everything else. Does council have the right or the ability from the operational side to strike these amendments out and bring it back to something that fits in with what the feedback has said, to be able to change the document?
The short answer, yes, but with a caveat on it, because it's can be a little bit disingenuous if you go out offering one thing and then make significant wholesale changes in what's ultimately adopted. So I think what the community are really looking for is some form of certainty that says, okay, we've increased water pricing by CPI, 4.5%, or whatever that figure might be. That's what they're being asked to actually comment on, and then that's ultimately what you'd like to think council was going to adopt, or people will love it if you actually adopt something that's a little bit less. But I think to go out only increasing it by 1.78 and then potentially increase it by significantly more would be a little disingenuous. It's probably better to go out on the high side, and if you have a mind to want to change it later on, then that option's far more palatable, I would think, for the community than the other way.
Thanks, Mr. General Manager. Councillor Packham is next.
Oh. Clarification, which is that the idea is to raise exactly the same amount of money as council is now proposing. It's not proposing to increase the water charges or decrease them. It's just changing the distribution so that low-income families are better off.
Appreciate the clarification, Councillor Robinson. Councillor Packham.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree with the sentiment of the mover of the original motion, and what Councillor Robinson is talking about is that, and it's also in concert with the discussion we had with the Acting Chief Officer, Assets and Services, at the conclusion of the meeting, the workshop, is that should we go back and remodel, if we kept access charges the same, would we still raise the same amount of money? That's a recollection conversation that I had with the Acting Chief Officer at the conclusion of the meeting, the workshop. And I think that's what the sentiment of Councillor Robinson is saying, apart from the fact it says about. It's just an estimate, but to conclude, it is about trying to achieve the same result of cash for the water fund by keeping access charges the same. And she's given the leeway for councillors, coming back to my previous question about which tier we would adjust to achieve that same result. And she's actually given the latitude to council staff to look at all tiers and come back to that. I'm sure going out to public who say it's no more, but we'll be okay. I think that in terms of the submissions, I took that to be as received, not as and when received, but as received and not summarised or sanitised. So again, coming back to request Councillor Robinson for clarification, I wouldn't see that as they are received being in content, not as when they are received. And I'd like that clarification from the mover of the amendment, please.
Thanks, Councillor Packham. Councillor Robinson, in response. Councillor Gaddis, thank you.
Well, I'd quite actually like to see them before we normally see them. Remember that it was about, for the LSPS, I think the full submissions were available on the Monday for the Wednesday meeting. So we really do need them in a more timely fashion.
So not exactly as you were suggesting, Councillor Packham. Councillor Gaddis.
Thank you. I too just had a memory of a previous workshop where we talked about that we wouldn't, and we discussed this as a group of councillors, that we wouldn't make any updates to water charges until, I will absolutely get this acronym incorrect, but the Integrated Water Strategy document is produced later this year and tabled to us so that we can actually see what the overarching water strategy is for the entire region before making any updates. Could someone fill me in on that acronym, please, through the chair? What's that document called?
It's the
Integrated Water Cycle Management Strategy, yes.
That's what I was going to say. Thank you.
Well, can I just quickly say that if Councillor Gaddis would like to have no changes whatsoever, in other words, no updates and no, which means freezing both the access and the consumption charge, that could be I'd support that amendment.
I'd like to get the budget out on public exhibition. There's been a lot of work gone into it to this point in time. I'd then like us all to take another considered look at it and provide any submissions that we've got. So I'd actually like to stick with the original motion.
Thanks, Councillor Gaddis. I mean, the importance of this item, I noticed, Councillor Packham, you were going to, but nothing to say?
Well, it's not a mute point, but if we have to go in seriatim on an amendment of the amendments, it's a possibility, but no, in seriatim of the amendment of the.
So back to the mover of the amendment. Well,
I'm happy to vote in seriatim.
As a seconder, I am too.
The issue is we need to move it as the motion first, then
we have to amend.
Amend what's on the board, that then vote for each part in seriatim. So my understanding is that the amendment needs to be voted on, and then we can, when it becomes a substantive motion, we then can do it
Vote
piece by piece for those
if the amendment
who don't speak Latin.
No, what we're doing is voting on each clause in the amendment separately, so that some may get in and some may not. And then whatever's voted on becomes the motion.
I'm happy with that.
So we have an amendment on the screen. We've been asked to vote in seriatim of the items of the amendment prior to those items potentially becoming part of the substantive motion. So item D, we'll put this to the vote.
If that's the entire motion A through.
Well, we're just voting on. So yeah, we will. We'll start by voting on item D. So in seriatim, how do we vote on item D? 4.
Okay, I found this on the web for how to revise item D. Check it out.
Thanks, Siri. So, sorry, item D. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 4, and against. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 against. And I have the casting vote. Item E. Sorry. So we declare item D, the amendment of item D lost. So item E, those voting for. 1, 2, 3, 4. And against. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Declare that lost. Item F, those voting for. 2, 4, and against. 8. Declare that item lost. Item G, those voting for. 2, and against 6. Oh, yeah, remember it's not a, yeah, 8 against. And finally, item H, those voting for, 2 and against, hands right up, 8. That item's also lost. So the amendment in its entirety has been lost. So we now go back to the substantive motion, which the mover was Councillor Widders. So we're back to the original motion. Councillor Widders, it's your motion. Does anyone else want to speak on the substantive motion that was moved by Councillor Widders? Councillor Packham.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do want to speak on this. I do have concerns, and I'm hoping that during this exhibition period, if it goes up to public exhibition, that the community looks at how much we're spending, when we're spending. I actually agree with both the mover and the seconder that this is a can-do council, but it's at what cost and when. It's all about the timing. You remember that when we put in this SRV, we were going to the old Paul Keating J curve. It has to get a lot worse and a lot worse still before it's going to get better. The documents talk about the first year of the SRV being a minus $3-4 million budget. There's not a lot of talk in this document about what's happening in this year. And when we did the second quarter budget review only in February, I believe, we'd blown that budget out from another $3.5 million loss to a $4.5 million loss, not accounted for, not looking like it's going to be recovered. And then this document again coming forward is another $4 million loss in the operating fund. Now you might say we need to spend money, we need to renew some things, but we're not talking about the CapEx budget, we're talking about an operating budget. And we have to understand also that that's an extra $3.5 million in rates receipts in this period now that the SRV has been activated, and yet we still want to go $4 million negative. That's actually a $7.5 million delta from zero baseline. So I'm only asking that when the public look at how much we have to put forward, how much we don't have, you spend to what your income is, not spend someone else's dime and hope that generations down the line are going to go and pick that up. I don't like to see the water access charge increase. I don't like to see fees and charges just being increased by a nominal CPI figure. And if you look deeply into the fees and charges, some of those fees and charges are actually being increased by 8 or 9%. So don't just take it on face value that that's the document. I do believe that if we're chasing a carbon neutral, healthier, cooler climate society, even though I don't always subscribe to everything on the table there, that we shouldn't increase charges for delivering green waste to council. And ergo, I don't believe that council should charge more for those that want to put mulch on their gardens and contribute back to that greening of our space and the cooling of our climate. So this will probably go out to public. I just want everyone to understand that you have to look a little deeper into the documents and really feel what you feel as ratepayers, not just hangers-on, not just the nice to have, and not just the parties. I don't necessarily believe. I mean, there's entertainment value in some of the initiatives in there that actually don't go to the broader community. They actually only go to those ratepayers who can afford the ticket, the cost of entry. And that means there's a barrier to entry to those just who are baseline ratepayers. So just be very careful when you're having it and just look closely at what affects you and bring back the suggestions, as Councillor Robinson said. Nice to see good, in-depth people thinking about those submissions so that we can tweak it when it comes to the final budget. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Councillor Packham. Any other contributors to this? Councillor McMichael.
Yes, I'd like to thank my fellow councillors for their remarks. I I agree, this is a huge budget. We have a number of services. We've looked at what we want this council to do. We've asked ratepayers for an SRV and they've agreed to it. One of our previous speakers in the public forum earlier mentioned that biosecurity was just something. Biosecurity is in fact an enormous part of council's remit, and so there are all kinds of issues and projects and programs in this budget which are useful, helpful, and things for the region, not just for single people, not just for ordinary everyone's, but for the whole community. So we've looked at it, and it'll be really great if everyone can look at it and look at it as a whole. And yeah, as someone said, we've done all kinds of things for this council, and thanks.
Thanks, Councillor McMichael. Councillor Robinson.
Yeah, no, I mean, I understand that people are submission weary, but after the LSPS and all the other consultations we've had this year, but the operational plan and the budget and all the other things that are on public display are really, really important. And we need the community's input. So whatever happens, please think about reading the documents. Please think about putting in a submission as to what you would want, because this should be the community's plan. It should be the community's operational plan and the budget. And do have a look at everything, and let's have your constructive submissions. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Robinson. Noting that Councillor Witters has just left the chamber and about to call this to the vote on his motion, we might have to just wait a minute. Haven't missed any comments or contributions from the Mayor. You're nothing to good. Okay, very good.
I think if he's not here, we can just move on.
Okay. Well, in that case, Councillor O'Connor.
Yeah, I'm very concerned about this budget, and I would endorse the comments of some of my colleagues who suggested we can look very closely at it. Budgets seem to be done in a big hurry always. They're probably the most critical thing all of them. So many people in our community are struggling with the SRV, as well as all the other costs that have gone up. So there are some things that we do, like the treatment of large fees and charges that might not be very costly.
Thanks, Councillor O'Connor, and also for filling that void. Welcome back, Councillor Witters. And so if there's no further comments, we'll put this item of these three important documents to the vote. So those for, I declare that carried unanimously. Now we move on to item 11.1, which is the New England Rail Trail, a resolution relating to resolution 5624. Councillors, we have a motion for item 11.1 to rescind the resolution regarding the New England Rail Trail, the details of which are on page 199 of the agenda. Can I call for a mover? Councillor Gadders, and a seconder, Councillor Galletley. We now have a motion on foot. Before we debate it, is there anyone unclear about what we are debating here? Councillor Gadders, could you just... Yeah, Councillor O'Connor. Yep, yeah, please. I'm not sure what's going on. Your microphone might swap to this one. We may have a slight technical glitch here, so we might just take a pause while.
Oh, great. Yep, thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you. Councillor O'Connor.
Oh, well, Mr. Chair, in relation, you asked if we're all clear what's going on. I just want to make sure we're just rescinding, or the motion is to rescind the motion of the on 9.1 from the 24th of April ordinary council meeting.
That's correct.
Yep. Okay.
So, as the mover, Councillor Gadders, would you like to speak? Oh, Councillor Packham.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I'm just wondering procedurally, we don't have a signed rescission motion before us in the chamber. Yeah, and with respect, it's not brought before the chamber nor in the agenda.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Nor do you need one, Councillor Packham. It's been received and the meeting's been called on that basis. If you would like a copy of it, we can make that available to you.
But
Not trying to be difficult, but procedurally that is appropriate, correct?
No.
But no evidential?
If you want a copy of it, we can get you a copy of it, but it's not required to be part of the papers. We expect that you trust that if we receive something in writing with signed signatures on it from councillors, we trust that you will trust us that we've actually received it and the meeting's been called on that basis. But if that trust isn't there, more than happy to provide it to you.
I'm not commenting.
Okay, in that case, are there any other questions about what we're about to move here? Okay, Councillor Gadders.
Yeah, thank you. I guess I'd like to say a few words. Obviously, it's a very important item on the docket. We've obviously got a lot of people in the room and probably online watching that. So I'd like to take the opportunity to make a few comments around why I'd like to move this rescission, but also why I was one of the signatories on the rescission. So why am I for this rescission motion? So quite simply, I believe that the outcome on this topic from the last OCM was wrong. Again, this is not a decision for trains or bikes, but rather this is a decision to do nothing or do something. It's an evidence-based decision. The project was adopted by Council in 2016 to move forward. Public Works have reviewed the project and provided recommendations. They've also completed a project plan and costed the project. All that information was available in the last papers. Regional Development Australia have built a business case which has showed a positive outcome for the project. This information was then also used to get the grant funding. Grant funding has been made available. The available $5.4 million will get us the project started. Different terms bandied around. I think stage one, we've heard mini something today, mini start, but that will get the project started. We need to start somewhere. So it's because of these facts that I'm for using the available funds to move forward with the project. I'm sure there's still some process and hoops that we need to get through, and any further delays means that we may not be able to complete the project in the time frame that the funding has been made available to us. So we cannot delay if we want to move forward with this particular funding. So since our last OCM meeting on the 24th, this has certainly been a hot topic in our local government area. I'm pretty sure that everybody's feeling a level of fatigue, whether you're watching the tennis on socials or whether you're actually part of the detailed discussion that's going on. So I'd like to thank the community for stepping up and making their opinion known since the last meeting. Since that last meeting, our councillor inboxes have seen a flood of emails. It's actually the most emails we've seen as a collective group on a single item this term. The majority of these emails requested ARC to reverse the decision that was made at the last meeting. I have actually done a count of that if anyone wants to see the numbers, but that was the majority, was to say, please reverse the decision of the 24th. We've seen a petition organised by a local community group. Today, the names on that petition are reaching nearly 6,000 signatures. I mean, that is a remarkable result in such a short period of time. So thank you to the community group that got that going. I guess what I see as a true sign of support, and this was mentioned earlier in the Have Your Say sessions, a true sign of support for this community project is the offer by many local businesses to put their hands in their pockets and provide funding to support the maintenance of the project on an annual basis. We heard the number before, $23,000 a year they're willing to pony up for this project for the community's advantage. Additionally, there's the support of Backtrack, who we all know and can see the value that they provide to this community. So Backtrack are also willing to put their resources in to be part of that maintenance program as well. These two community funded, let's call it community funded items, are in addition to what was already funded by a renewable energy zone battery, which was in as part of the first decision. So that $20,000 a year for 20 years. So stage one maintenance is already covered. And now we've got communities coming to the aid to increase that coverage. So again, I want to say thank you. I see this project as a great opportunity for our region. It builds a community asset with the grant funds. That asset then becomes available to our locals. It then goes on to provide a tourist attraction for years to come and raise the profile of this region. So I absolutely support the rescission motion and I absolutely support the project. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gadders. Councillor Gillespie.
Yeah, well, I pretty well mirror everything that Councillor Gaddy said. There's no doubt about that. And I've always been a supporter of it. I've thought that we need something like that in this area. I believe that the other little communities, you all the way up along to Glen Innes can do well out of it, which we're probably a little bit lucky in Armidale. We've got a few more eggs in our basket here that we can keep our head above water with. Whether that's good or not, I don't know. But because keeping it simple keeps everyone pretty happy. But it's a bit like the renewable energy debate. We're going to have people for and people against, and all the opinions and such. But at the end of the day, I really do believe that we're doing the right thing by starting this. Yes, there might be little steps at first and there's no guarantees, but I haven't sort of been given too many guarantees in my lifetime. Lucky enough to get away with a few things that I probably shouldn't have, but that's all fine. But I'm just a real supporter of it, and I think if we can all the councillors can move on, I think we've got more chance of bumping our bum on the moons than trains coming back here, and we just move on and make this work for the whole region. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Councillor Gillespie. Any other Councillor Michael?
So I don't like a rescission motion. If people have an idea or a motion, they can do another motion, and I don't like a rescission motion. I would note that the motion that we put up last month was not to actually say that the rail trail was against the rail trail. It was for more information. We asked for a number of questions and we asked for a number of reports from various groups. And we haven't received, we've received some of those responses, and I thank the Mayor for the discussion I had with him last week. And the maintenance, the maintenance has been answered, but I still have questions about the rail trail framework. I can't say that I'm persuaded by the idea that trains will come back, despite the enthusiasm of the Northern Rail Trail people. I like trains, but there are other issues in that motion, and I'm not persuaded that this is a fabulously public project. There are others. I think there are lots of others. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor McMichael. Councillor Witters.
Yes. This motion to rescind what's written in the motion from the last meeting in April astounds me. I'm a little bit confused on what exactly you're trying to rescind out of those 4 points and why you need to rescind those. My understanding of rescission motions is that they're to be used for if new information has come to light that wasn't available when that decision was made, if a procedural issue occurred during the moving of that motion, which then affected the outcome, or if there was a councillor absent whose vote may have changed the course of the motion. I'd be interested to see which one of those three the undersigned of the motion are trying to rescind on, because if it's neither of them, it shows, for lack of better words, inexperience in the process, and really, I suppose, the right use of it. My other concern out of this is, and I really do apologise if I offend anyone with the next couple of words that I'm about to say, the rescission motion seems to be a response from what can only be described as a condescendingly, pretentiously disgusting attempt to bully certain councillors with the emails that we received. I note Councillor Gaddy's mentioning of these emails. Depending on how you read them, it was either, if you were for the rail trail, they were good. If you voted against it, you were spoken to rather rudely, and some councillors' rights and abilities to even sit at this table were questioned. I think it really is. I want to thank those who had genuine concerns and approached the matter civilly. I thank you for doing that in the right way. For those of you who tried to bully and talk down to and were condescending, I really think it's a good chance to buy yourself a mirror and have a good hard look at yourself. It's not the way to get democracy done. If you're upset with the decision, that's fine. But to talk to the way that some of these, not all of them, but some of the emails that have spoken to councillors, it really is a blight on the community. You can't just put in a rescission motion because you're lost and you don't like it. As I said, if that was the case, you'd never get anything done. You know, you could, because you've got 3 months to put it in, so you can continue to delay and do all that sort of stuff and go from there. So my question and my point back, I've got a lot that we can talk to in regards to the rail trail and a few other different things, but that's not what we're here to vote about. We're here to vote about whether to rescind that motion. So I would like to see from the movers or the undersigned in there any of the 3 things I was looking for. New information, because you can say that the information from the businesses and from Backtrack is new, but that's reactionary based on the vote. If that was a good idea, it should have been in the proposal to begin with. Something new, was there a procedural issue? And there was no councillors absent, so there's really only 2 things for you to answer. and prove that a rescission motion is necessary, because this motion was actually an amended motion. So you had your chance to beat this motion in the amendment when the amendment was put up, and that got put down. So then it got voted up again as the substantive motion. So if you want the councillors who voted for this motion to change their vote, you're going to have to give them new information. So when you get your chance to reply, I'm waiting with bated breath in regards to what comes out.
Thank you, Councillor Witters. Noting that the Mayor can't turn his light on, but he had his hand up first. So if I would like, we haven't heard from him today. So, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just having heard Councillor Witters then, and I have read through a couple of times clauses 17 of the Code of Meeting Practice, the 3 items that Councillor Witters was looking for are not required. So that's my comment.
Are not required, is what you said.
So not required. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Gadders.
Thank you. Seeing I was putting this motion on the table, I'd like the opportunity. Sorry, I'm responding to your questions. Yep. Oh.
Thanks, Councillor Witters.
You'll get your chance to, under the Code of Meeting Practice, you'll get a chance to respond at the end to any concerns. It's still the debate. So it should be, I know I've asked you to respond, but you have to wait to the end for your right of reply.
It's my understanding that Councillor Gadders would want to respond to your question, but we can move to Councillor O'Connor.
I'd just like to congratulate Councillor Gallatley on finally supporting a rescission motion, which he's been so trenchantly critical of other councillors, including myself, for doing that in the distant past. And I do note that Councillor Gaddy's reason given for proposing this motion is that he thinks the decision is wrong. He thinks the decision that was made to ask for more information is wrong. Nothing urgent, no new information required, just he doesn't like it. Now, there's a bit of a theme coming out as far as I'm concerned. I've been the indirect recipient of abuse online, abusive emails and threats as a result of moving the amendment to the motion last week or last month. I don't really, it's actually quite shattering to me to be on the receiving end. And I know I am not the only councillor in this group of 11 councillors who's found that the intimidation that's been levelled at her is problematic in the extreme. Now, I would like to thank some of the speakers for their words. And look, I know the community, many of the community that want this project to go ahead are very well intentioned, and they believe that the predictions, the opinions of some years ago from the Regional Australia Radani report about, you know, this massive tourist boom once the whole rail trail eventuates, they believe them. And look, I guess that's open to them. I don't believe them. I don't believe them. I do not think that this little mini trail, stage 1, is going to deliver any of the benefits. And I think that that's proclaimed for it. And I think that the report that we were faced with is an insult to our intelligence by suggesting that we rely on aged predictions of economic benefit of a completely different project. This is not the project that the 5.4 million suggestion, if you like, was made for. That was for Black Mountain to Ben Lomond, and everybody at the time knew it was going to cost more like 9.8 million. And yet, why did our council accept 5.4 million for that? Now, I'm obliged. You know, I've been a councillor for many years, and I'm obliged every day that I live to think about all of the community. not just my friends, not just the rich people that can afford to go to New Zealand and experience, you know, the Otago Rail Trail and all the other associated attractions that actually develop the economic progress that they've made there. But we are not in the same circumstance. Can I remind my colleagues that there is a 10,740 or so petition lodged in the lower house of the New South Wales Parliament, begging for the return of public transport, train transport, the same transport that I grew up with in Sydney and that is expanding at a huge rapid rate. 4 or 5 tunnel borers boring away the state's economy, boring tunnels under Sydney to provide, you know, the 30-minute city. What have we got? I ruined my car driving back and forth to Tamworth because that's the only place I could get medical treatment. Mine is an easy story, an easy loss, but there are many people losing their lives here because of lack of proper public transport. And we have yet to wait and wait and wait for an integrated public transport plan. It's due to come out. We can't commit our railway, the vital infrastructure that was locked up, yes, locked up and this community deprived of those services some 30 over years ago, but on the basis that when the need was restored, that this community and all regional communities would have the right to the transport that they needed and to the freight corridors that they needed. The Inland Rail right now is going nowhere. It's been unfunded, if you like. Now, I know it's lovely to think of the rail trail, but our community is right across Australia. People are suffering, you know, difficulties even keeping a house over their head. The causes of that are beyond the control of this council. But this community is manfully stumped up for a 50% rate rise. And all we wanted to do with this motion, all we wanted to do was find out what the additional burden on our budget was going to be for the next 30 years and what it was going to mean to individual ratepayers in this community. Maybe not the people with a $7,000 e-bike, maybe people who are struggling with just a little push bike to get around town. Yeah, okay, I've gone on for too long. I say shame on you for not allowing us to do our job, to find out the information and represent the whole of the community. I say shame on you for not respecting the resolution of this council.
Thank you, Councillor O'Connor. Councillor Robinson.
Yeah, well, mine is really a question, and I'm still puzzled as to why we need a rescission motion when the only issues of conflict with the follow-up motion are about getting information. And I'm always for getting as much relevant information as possible. And it seems to me that the information on the full costs of the rail trail are vitally important, and we should have those irrespective of what else happens. And also, you know, I'm only too well aware that although I do believe the funding, the response from the funding body that money cannot be repurposed, it was a little bit of a surprise to a lot of people when we saw the way the question was framed, when the email was asking to provide confirmation that the money could not be repurposed, and the council had no intention of repurposing the money anyway. That's not the way to ask a question. It really confuses people rather than enlightens people, and I think that's a serious issue that we've got to look at. If there was, the previous motion was to find out and have discussions about repurposing the money, and as far as I can see, all we had was a little email saying that please, the council has no intention of repurposing the money anyway, and that's not really the best way to answer that question. So I'd still like that question answered as well. Even though I agree with the timescale, we cannot afford to lose money or lose time, because if we do, we might not be able to get the grant funding.
Who's your question directed to, Councillor Robinson?
Anybody who can answer it, and if not, we'll just leave it standing.
Well, I think it's directed to the General Manager. It's a request. It's a request for a certain official body to give a certain answer. It's a leading letter, if you like.
I thought the question was what was the need for a rescission motion, which I'm not the author of the rescission motion, so I can't answer that for you.
Yeah, okay, well, we'll let it stand then.
I'd just like to put on notice I'll be putting that question in more detail. Why was a leading email sent to NEMA by our staff?
Thank you. Are there any other? So if there's no further, Councillor Mepham. Sorry, you're not part of the council, Ms. Ledger. It's not a public forum.
They keep asking the question, you don't answer.
This is a meeting of.
They keep asking the question and you don't answer it. When are they getting the information for rail?
Ms. Ledger, if you're going to continue to interrupt the meeting, and it was decided to leave the question on the table by Councillor Robinson. Thank you, Councillor Mepham.
Yeah, I think the fading time frame that's available to get some of this paperwork in has certainly put some pressure on everybody to do what they can. Today's decision is not going to guarantee a rail trail. It's not the purpose. It's to move forward and provide the evidence, and the submissions that has rightly been stated today haven't been made available yet by council to support the proposal. I have met with a lot of people over the weekend and had phone calls and emails, and I thank the rail folk who spent time with me over the weekend and the rail trail people. And it really is just now a pressure cooker of time that we need to come up with some decisions, I guess, but bear in mind today's decision is not going to deliver necessarily a rail trail. A lot of work has gone into the submission. I think the rail trail people deserve the right and respect to get on with putting that up to see how it fares with the two departments that will be needing to adjudicate on that. The rail proponents have also got applications in to lease the corridor, and that's fair enough. They have a right to do that, and more power to them that they've been able to get on and do that. And the government departments will decide between all the proponents who has met the requirements and who hasn't. I think it would be a shame to continue to delay the process till we run out of time. I think there's been an effort to try and not spend too much time trying to come up with more reports and more answers. And yes, those things are important, and yes, we do need to have that information. But I don't think today's decision is going to be the end of or the end state. It pains me to think that Guyra gave birth to this originally back in Guyra Shire days. I know some of the rail trail folk have said it's okay that it's been moved to Armidale and they'll probably benefit, and we don't know whether Guyra will ever benefit if there's no further funding. So it does pain me that that has happened. Nevertheless, I think the bottom line is we need to give council and the general manager some approval to actually put this stuff up and find out how it actually stands up before the time runs out and then it's just dead in the water because time.
Thank you, Councillor Mepham. Councillor Packham.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think the question of having a rescission motion, there was a motion that was passed by 6 councillors. 6 in my mind that had their own reasons for voting it down. It wasn't a quorum, it wasn't a caucus, it was everyone had their own reasons for voting that motion down. And the fact that they requested additional information, including whether the money could be repurposed, and I don't care what the technical answer is, the technical answer would come through. But the fact was the council officer stated to an officer of the funding body Council does not have any intention to repurpose the money, of course, but could you just give us an answer that placates the councillors and puts them in their place for having voted it down? I'll leave that. I'm going to leave that, but that's what was happening here, and most people around the table know what that is. All that was asked of last month's motion was the ability to look at this possibility, this perspective, objectively. Everybody knows, and for my time on council, albeit only a couple of years, fair enough, is that every document that comes forward with a recommendation is written pro the recommendation. It's not a summary, it's not a conclusion, it's not on a balance of all the possibilities, left and right, the strengths of this one, the weaknesses of that one, the strengths of that one, the weaknesses of this one, the opportunity here, the opportunity there, is that everything is written in one direction. We have the rail trail proposal from NERT, we have the PWA, they come along and then said, there is somewhere in that document to all the speakers that says, of option 4 options, there's a third option saying, we think that maybe starting in Armidale is a good idea. But all that was said from the motion last month was, can we have some more information? Objectively looked at, critically evaluated, and just assessed. I don't personally believe that the costs that were put on the table of $20,000 for the short-term version, or the stage 1 of the version, and $100,000 is going to be the true end-up cost. I don't see evidence of council saying that of the C-suite up here, significant amount of hourly cost up here, that every time someone speaks about the rail trail or needs to manage the rail trail, or a division head or the transport chief or the person who pushes the gravel around, that cost is actually going to be accumulated and put towards this project. Some of the speakers talked about marketing, yes, and we've had where the Wander runs deep along the Waterfall Way and everyone contributes to that and we contribute to left and right. Is that going to be accumulated? All we asked was critical evaluation. And that's where I'm coming from. My original motion, or the amendment to the original motion put in 2022, I believe, was that this should be cost neutral for ratepayers. I've not stepped away from that question. I've asked is that, yes, and Mr Mayor came up and we found some people want to put some money in, some people want to pledge some money. And my history with government organisations, the pledges are great until they disappear. But at full cost, and the CFO may take interest in this, because it was part of a conversation we had when we were looking at capital works, is that a $30 million build cost, roughly $30 million, over a 30-year lease, means $900,000 of depreciation that has to be legally regulated, funded by ratepayers and set aside in the deferred maintenance pool. So it doesn't really matter if you only spend $100,000 on the rail trail or $200,000 on the trail. At the time of completion, it will be $900,000 that must be sucked from ratepayers and set aside. Now, where council spends that could be in good places, could be in bells and whistles and banjo players and buskers, I don't know, but that is the real cost to the ratepayers over time, and can you afford to do that? Do you want to afford to do that? I see the things about the economy. I wonder, Guy, and no disrespect to former Mayor Heitbrink, is that was never progressed as a shire. It was not the #1 economic stimulant for the shire. It could be one for us, but we have to influence investment in the region. We're not there to create the economy in the region or to pay for that economy to be built. We talk about 4,000 engine room jobs. Okay, these are periphery jobs, but it doesn't get us doctors, doesn't get us nurses, doesn't get us dentists, doesn't get all these other services in transport or otherwise. That could be done. And we talk about, since when why is it now that farmers have to earn off-farm income? Yes, they could get an opportunity out of this, but really we're an ag society, and why are we asking them to you can go put a little vineyard up and you get a little tasting room and you can build another house on your block and someone's going to walk all their way up there or carry their bags on the back of their bike and stay. It's great ideas, but it's something that's not primary. Why is it that council, instead of committing to providing cheap hay and lucerne to farmers in the region, says that we'll do it, we'll put our money there? Why did other councils in this bushfire fund look for water storage tanks for rural communities, fire danger indicator signs, revitalising disaster resilience facilities, bushfire education workshops? this is just one grant that we've applied for. It's possibly not the best bucket that we could have gone for this, because it actually doesn't support the economy of those that were affected by bushfire.
Councillor Packham is still talking, and Councillor Golightly's tapping of the pen is interrupting his talking. It's the same as talking over. So Councillor Packham has the right to finish his without interruption.
Thank you. And I can see that you're noting the time, Councillor Golightly, and I'd given Councillor O'Connor 6 minutes, so I was giving the same grace to Councillor Packham. So if you'd just like to finish another 15 seconds, Councillor Packham, and then we'll move on. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr Chair. My time starts now. Yes, I'm very much used to Councillor Golightly trying to officiate everything that goes on in our proceedings, our workshops, our email traffic and otherwise. And I just wanted one final thing, is I'm saddened to hear that Councillor O'Brien felt compelled not to turn up today because the vitriol that was commissioned by people in this even in this gallery today, that back towards us, has just been absolutely harrowing for making I'm going to say an under-informed decision, because we don't have the information. We need to make an objective decision on the process. Thank you.
I've got a question in regards to the motion. If this, noting that Councillor Robinson has a motion in afterwards, what is the time difference in, because if this motion gets up and the motion from April gets rescinded, then it's 2 weeks to the next council meeting when another motion on this issue will have to come up then if Councillor Robinson's motion gets voted down. What's the time difference between what is requested in the motion that is being rescinded from April to get the information and whatever the information councillors were looking for? Is the time difference, because it seems like from Councillor Mepham's comments as well, the time on whether we can get things done, is the time difference comparable? Is this motion going to take a longer time compared to a new motion being written in May? Like, that's the whole point of it. It seems like the whole point of this rescission motion seems to be around the timing. So what would get better result quicker? Keeping the motion as written and council providing councillors with the stuff that they want, or rescinding this motion? Because if you rescind this motion, it doesn't go back to the motion before it was amended from April. It just rescinds that motion. So a new one will have to come up. So just asking the GM, all the staff, is there a time comparable difference?
Well, I'd like to add a question to that and to the General Manager. What is the deadline with the National Emergency Management Authority? Is there some deadline whereby we've got to satisfy them about something? And if so, what is that?
Mr. General Manager.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Are you talking about when the funding's got to be spent? Is that your question?
My question is that there's this misinformation, as I see it. I don't think council's ever received $5.4 million in their bank account, and as far as I'm aware, there isn't any deed of grant funding deed. So, what's the time pressure in relation to NEMA?
Well, I think, and I may have to rely on one of my colleagues to fill in the blanks, but essentially the money's got to be spent. There was a blanket extension provided to spend these funds through to 31st of March 2025. So that's the final deadline in terms of that. If you work back from that, in terms of going to tender and procurement and all of those sorts of things, and then getting the formal approval, obviously we've got to say to NEMA that we want to move forward. We've got the imprimatur of council to do so, and we need to be able to do that before we can secure the lease and all of those sorts of things. So if you work backwards from the 31st of March 2025, there's a number of time imperatives, and every day we don't work on those, or we don't have some form of agreement, we're just getting closer and closer to having to hand that money back. We don't have it yet because we haven't been able to formally say to them that we've got it.
The expression "hand the money back" is like we don't get the money, but it's not. I mean, if there's no grant deed,
lose the grant.
It's semantics, isn't it? Really, I mean, whether you've got it or not, if you don't take it up, you lose it. So it's yeah.
Back to my question, will council have answers to the councillors before the 12 days of the next meeting, or will the next meeting come up beforehand?
Seeing you've given me the floor, from my perspective, I don't think that there's necessarily any way we can satisfy those who are not in favour of going ahead with the rail trail. And I say that because, okay, there was a couple of questions raised at the last council meeting that needed clarification, but I don't know that answers to those will be enough, because I've just received 40 questions today from at 11:57 from Councillor O'Connor that obviously you'll want, in good time, will want some response to, and you won't, I imagine you won't feel like you're in a position to be able to make an informed decision until you have answers to all 40 of those. I think earlier today around, sorry? Well, yeah, but nonetheless, there's 40 of them on top of the resolution from last week. And then I think at 9:13 this morning, you sent the Chief Officer Assets, Chief Officer Planning and Activation around 35 odd questions. Multiple questions, 10 or 20 or so, some of which may be similar to the ones that you've sent me. But my point in all of that is that, to your question, I don't know that we can ever satisfy those that are not in support of moving forward those that voted the way they did last. I don't know that there's anything that we can do to necessarily support that. I don't know what the time frame is.
Thanks, Mr. General Manager. Are there any further speakers or Councillor Gathers? Did you have a right of reply there?
If I'm allowed to get back in the game, thank you.
You are.
Now's the right time. You just tell me when. Look, lots of great discussion, guys, and that's what this is about, is having that discussion. As the Mayor said, there's technically not a need to have those 3 points. I'm not here to debate that. What I'm saying is, why was I happy to move forward with this rescission motion? Let me start with point B, which is still on the screen up there, which was around repurposing the fund. Cut all that away. It's about question, can we repurpose the fund? As far as I'm concerned, the reply that we did have from the funding body put that to bed. We will not be able to repurpose the fund. So whether it was asked, excuse me, my turn, whether it was asked in the right way, the improper way, look, I'm not going to go into, in an individual's, curation of an email, honestly. The reality is, I believe that was the answer we got, and that was a very black and white piece of information that came out of that. I guess then, in terms of point A, the question is around delay the commencement of construction while we basically get more reports. Well, I was actually quite satisfied with the reports that were already in there. I believe it had all the information. I believe perhaps not everybody got an opportunity to read the details. There was certainly a lot of questions swirling around on social media, not that we should be guided by all that, but there was clear questions and guesstimates that have been swirling around, which were answered in the reports. What's the lease cost? It's $1 a year for the next 30 years. This was all in there. So while we can have a lot more questions, I believe what I read when I read the details of those reports was satisfied me to move forward. So as far as I'm concerned, I look at those two conditions and say we've met B, and I believe we'd already met the first one anyway. So then it comes to, as Councillor Meppen suggests, we're in a spot that if we delay, then the funding, let's choose a word, goes away. All right, we're not giving it back technically, but it's the same end result. It goes away. Now, as part of one of the documents that was here was actually the project plan that gives us that first 9 kilometres out to the station, and there was a project plan with the timeline in it. If you can look at the start and the stop of that timeline, we actually don't have a lot more time up our sleeves. We're in the process already. We've still got a lot of process to go. And in simple form, it is give the council, give the staff some direction so that they can continue the process, which has started in 2016. Now, the process is something along the lines, just to simplify it, get moving, the go decision from here, get moving. Then go to the funding body, write the deeds, get the deeds to prove that the grant is available to us, while not in our bank yet, is available to us. Go back to state, sign the lease on the corridor to be able to do something with that. State won't move on the lease until they've seen that the deed has been written. They're very, very black and white, simple steps. So we've got to continue this process and keep it moving. So I believe that what we voted on the other day has been satisfied. Also, the reason behind the rescission, it does not give the General Manager and his staff a clear remit to get on with the next steps and get on with the process, which we are pushed up against the delay. So we've got to get this project finished, at least stage one, so that we can utilise those funds. Those funds are a gift from God. Local governments don't get grants all too often, and then we certainly don't want to misuse them or send them back if we can't get our act together. So that's somehow, Councillor Witters, a why I'm behind this rescission motion, why I'm a signatory to it, because I believe we've satisfied B. I believe we've already satisfied A. Thank you.
Another question for the mover of the motion. To clarify,
The right of reply, we're finished, Councillor Witters.
I'm allowed to ask a question before my vote. To clarify my decision to vote, I'm allowed to ask a question.
Please go ahead.
Thank you. Considering that this motion doesn't say no to commencing a rail trail, if this motion is rescinded and at the next meeting there comes a motion to proceed and it's voted down because the councillors who were looking for more information don't have their information, where do we go to from there?
I guess how long is a piece of string?
Where's the crystal ball?
We'll keep going around this same drain, same circle for time and time again. No, I'm not suggesting that we need to do that. What I'm suggesting is that's a heck of a lot of waste of everybody's time. So we need to be realistic about this. That says, as I said at the last meeting, we've got something in front of us. It's do something or do nothing, and I'm very much on the side of do something. This is an opportunity for us as a region to do a lot of good things. And we are on a ticking clock. I don't see it any other way. I think we are on a ticking clock and we need to take full advantage of this as quickly as we possibly can. Did that answer your question?
It was an answer.
Thank you. Okay, we've had a robust debate on this, and so it's time now to...
Can I have a thing on the seconder? Thank you very much. Thanks.
You can. Well, can you?
No. That's fine. I don't need it, but
Unless you'd like to ask a question of Councillor Gadders.
No, I think you summed it up really well. Thank you.
Okay, great. Well, we'll put this motion to the vote now. So those voting for 11.1, for the rescission. There's 1, 2. Yeah, 5. And those voting against the rescission. 5. So with the casting vote, the motion is carried. So now we move on to item 12.1, which is also related to the New England Rail Trail and associated matters.
I just have a point of order in relation to this motion. I've been informed that it was submitted on Monday the 6th of May, I think, and I think according to the Code of Meeting Practice, it needed to be in by 5 o'clock or on the previous Friday, as was the 11.1 was submitted on the Friday. So I think this one is actually out of time.
I'll defer to the General Manager to answer on that, as I wasn't the one that received it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The rescission motion was received on the 3rd, and advice was provided as part of that rescission motion that there would be a notice of motion coming forward on Monday the 6th.
This, sorry, I don't think that would satisfy the Code of Meeting Practices time requirements.
I believe it does.
In which case, if we're proceeding,
well, I just give notice that I may well take action as a result of that. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor O'Connor. So there's a notice of motion from Councillor Robinson, the details of which are on page 200 of the agenda. Councillor Robinson.
I'd like to move, but I need a seconder.
And do we have a seconder for this notice of motion? Councillor Gadders. Councillor Robinson.
Thank you. Well, just to try and calm people down, because it's been a very, very heated debate. And we all know that all councils face a terrible dilemma with grant funding, because it requires money to be spent by a specific date or lost forever, as happened with our hydrotherapy funding. And we all know that residents face cost of living pressures. And in an ideal world that really doesn't exist, and it's a shame, maybe the money would have been provided to alleviate our special rates variation, a grant of 5.4 million, if we could have kept the rates at last year's level for a year and then only had half a SRV the following year. But that's ideal world. It's fairies at the bottom of the garden, and it doesn't help. And it's not going to, so basically, if the outcome is that we have to spend it on a rail trail or nothing, the deadlines are getting closer and closer. And that's because Public Works Advisory Timetable devotes the next 4 months to discussions with the New South Government on leasing the corridor. And that includes their requirement for public consultation. And this is our opportunity to discuss public transport for this region, because only the New South Wales Government has figures on trips and train subsidies. The answer to a question in Parliament on the 22nd of July 2022 was all the information. Maybe Siri managed to get it, but at that time it was commercial in confidence. So I had to resort to counting people coming off the buses on a couple of occasions. And with the current setup of buses and trains, my guess is there might be about 7,000 passengers per year. Passenger trips per year. So if it costs 700 million to reinstate the train line, amortised over 20 years, that would work out at $5,000 for every passenger trip. So we really have to look at this, get the correct figures. I mean, my figures might be airy-fairy, they might be wrong, but until we know the answers, we can't have a sensible public transport policy, because after all, we've got a train line all the way from Armidale to Tamworth. But it doesn't work for Councillor O'Connor. She still had to drive. We need to use the facilities we've got. And
Objection.
So, sorry.
I really, really think that's...
Yeah, I withdraw that comment.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And when the train ran from Glen Innes to Armidale, it took 2.5 hours. And if I was going from Glen Innes to Sydney, I'd much rather have a bus leaving at 7 a.m. than getting up an hour earlier to catch a train at 6. And if I had medical appointments in Armidale, I'd be even happier with a bus that left at 9 and looped between Armidale, Guyra, Glen Innes, Inverell, Bandara and back to Armidale, because one bus trip could do a round trip of 2 per day, allowing residents much more convenient access. And we could also design buses and possibly even trackless trams to take both bikes and wheelchairs, as some public transport services do elsewhere. But I'm no expert, and I think the best thing is for Council to get together, as in my motion, with Transport New South Wales to develop a proper public transport plan for this area, and not only to ensure that And that should include ensuring the next generation of Explorer trains can carry bikes without dismantling, as well as the much needed transport strategy. And in the meantime, what I think, it might not be possible, but let's think about whether we can use the $1 million contingency to keep the rails. Some very well qualified individuals think it might be cheaper. And so we should look into it and that's what we should do if we want the support from our entire community. And it could also serve as a model for Ben Lomond to Glen Innes, where they're planning to pull up the rails. So if we can find ways of keeping the rails, then we could be a model for the rest of the rail trail. And I understand that Glen Innes has already submitted several documents to the New South Wales government. So maybe if we need to get cracking so that we can advise them whether it really is necessary to pull up the rails. And there's an awful lot of other things we could do in those next 4 months, working with the active transport strategy to encourage cyclists to stay a bit longer in Armidale. We need people with direct experience of active transport in this area. We need to set up a committee to review that plan before it goes to council, to see what's practical, what's needed, what are the possible routes there are, such as out to Demarrick Dam via Kirby, and most important of all, collecting data from councils on where cyclists go at the moment, and therefore where they prefer, and also look at data and injuries. So just to really quickly summarise, this new motion addresses several problems that the previous one didn't. It commits council to working with suitably qualified people to aim for a rails plus trails solution if that's possible. It commits council to working with locals to develop the current draft active transport strategy into affordable solutions that will serve the needs of our entire community. It commits council to working with the New South Wales government to develop a public transport strategy that serves the needs of the community. And it also seeks to improve communications with council so that common sense proposals like the ones I've just outlined can be considered when reports are being drafted instead of what happens at the last minute meeting. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Robinson. Councillor Gaddis.
There we go. Thanks. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, I don't need to spend a lot of time on this. I believe we are in better shape with this motion in terms of flushing out some of the additional pieces of information. But look, it's point 2 and 3 that to me are the key of this in terms of moving it forward, and then gets us thinking and moving on to the later, like the transport strategy, that sort of thing, because this is just one project in amongst, a network which we've got to consider going forward as well. But for me, I would absolutely support this to get moving on that first stage of the rail trail. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Gaddis. Councillor O'Connor.
I just wanted to suggest an amendment to delete paragraph 8 because it's obvious anyway, it's redundant.
Councillor Robinson. Councillor Widders, can you turn your microphone off for a minute, please?
Well, it's just a bad look. Paragraph 8, that any aspects of a previous council resolutions in conflict be rescinded. I mean, it's redundant. That's a matter of course anyway.
I prefer to keep it because otherwise we might be in difficulty.
Respect.
In the sense that we couldn't do anything.
Sorry.
In the sense that we couldn't even start planning until we've got all the other information. So I think we have to keep it because if we have 2 motions in conflict, then it would be a problem.
Well, I would then like to suggest that we add to that resolution with the exception of resolution 38/22.
Can you please explain what resolution 38/22 was?
A few years ago, or in 2022 February meeting, I think this resolution 38/22 basically committed, and I think the whole community has accepted the spirit of this, that this rail trail project be at no additional cost to the community, to the ratepayers of Armidale, and a number of other things. And I think we should save that because I think it's generally accepted that grant money and donations, but not rates revenue, should go towards this project, as it's not core business of council and the outcomes are not, they're speculative at the best.
Councillor Robinson.
Or could I ask the advice of my seconder?
Thank you. So I'm going to, this is my advice and I guess logic on the fly is we have a rescission motion that is activated, which clears the motion and decision of the 24th. So I believe that's already off the table. So that means we don't really need to be looking at anything prior to that. So I'm okay with taking that out. I did want to add, while I've still got the mic, and perhaps this is rather than an amendment, it's an item that we need to consider as part of the public submission for the previous item, second previous item, 9.1, the budget. We need to make sure that the Railtail project line item is put back in the budget because it was actually removed from the documentation for the 24th, understandably. Now that needs to go back in. I don't know what the process is internally to do that, whether it's at the end of the submissions, but if we could note that, please.
Ideally, I imagine it would be put in prior to the documents going for public exhibition.
Correct.
Okay. So, Councillor Robinson, you want to put your microphone on, Councillor Gaddis?
If we need to scroll the screen, there's a line item that says 100% in it. It should be in point 3. Up. Stop, sorry. Maybe it was in point, there it is, point 3B. Delivering the remainder subject to obtaining grant funding for construction planning. So I believe we're covered off on that. So therefore I'd like to stick with the original motion as suggested by Councillor Robinson.
Yeah, I think the last bit is redundant. Councillor O'Connor's amendment.
Oh, well, I press it.
So we settle on.
I press it. That means that we need to put a vote on it because if I can get a seconder.
So you will second Councillor O'Connor's amendment, Councillor Witters.
All right. Well, I mean, basically that motion back in 2022 was a sort of foundational motion in relation to whatever we go forward to with the proposal of the rail trail, and fundamentally it was that certain things could be done so long as there was no additional cost to the ratepayers. Of course, what's being suggested now are opportunity costs, but notwithstanding that, I think that was a very important resolution of council. So, and I think it's part of sort of a long-standing contract with the whole of our community. So that's why I press it.
Councillor Witters, do you want to add to anything to that?
No, I'll just concur with what Councillor O'Connor has said.
Thank you. Well, that being the case, with his amendment on the table, anyone have anything else to add for or against to debate the point before we vote on this amendment? No? Mr Mayor, no? Yeah, the piece in yellow, yeah, so...
I just want to make sure everybody's on the same page, in the front, in the back. If we accept this piece in yellow, it goes forward with everything above it. If we deny this piece in yellow, we actually move back to how it was sitting on there with number 8. So the yellow writing just goes away. Right? I just want to be very clear to everybody on the table and behind that what we're about to vote on is what's written in yellow. Correct?
That's correct. So we're voting on the piece in yellow as an amendment at the moment. So those for the amendment? You, Mr Mayor, were you? Yeah. 6? And against? Numbers don't add up. Councillor Robinson, are you voting or are you?
No, I didn't vote, so it counts as a...
So 6-4, 6-3 and a abstain.
Mr Mayor, I think Councillor Robinson's unsure. Could we maybe re-put the vote? I don't know.
Councillor Robinson, have you got a question before we?
Well, I think either way it doesn't matter because the vote is won. There's a majority for the amendment. And as I say, I'm unsure. Okay,
in which case then the amendment's been won, and now the substantive motion includes the amendment, and is there any further debate? I think a bit of administration going on over here, but not necessarily debate. So is there any further debate on the actual item put forward by Councillor Robinson? In which case then we can put Councillor O'Connor.
Sorry.
Oh.
I didn't want to lose my chance to speak against this. Look, yeah, I just want to say that I understand that you just want to go closer to the speeding bullet for the rest of the community that can't afford this. But I need to point out that, yes, there's a very vocal number of people that actually want to proceed with this. But I want to call out the fact that since October 2021, there's been no mention of any consultation. I need to say that the community has not been consulted, that there's been no attempt to even address the rail trail framework that's essential. And I regard it as disingenuous in the extreme. Maybe I'm wrong, but to me it's completely disingenuous to go to a federal funding body and claim you have community support when you've never even asked the community whether they want a rail trail. Yes, you've been badgered by a certain interest group and they're very vocal. Yes, there's been a lot of advocacy for a rail trail from a group within the community, but what any council, not just under the rail trail framework, but any council is required to do is actually ascertain, broad-based community opinion about a project of this magnitude and this significance. You're planning to cut down a section of the rail corridor, which impacts councils to the north, and it impacts the state of Queensland as well. So, but not a shred of actual community consultation has been done. So, I mean, you're planning to, I think the plan is you're going to have a rush at it in the next 4 months. Well, good luck. But I just think this is absolutely putting the cart before the horse, and it's an awfully stressful thing to have imposed on your councillors and on your community, and the amount of debate, the amount of emails that we've had to deal with, the amount of abuse we've had to deal with. You've actually we've created a situation of extreme division in the community, and I think that's really problematic. And what else? All right, good. There's been, no, excuse me.
Councillor Gladley, yep. Thanks, Councillor Witters. Councillor O'Connor, you can continue.
Look, I think there's been a degree of contempt for the community and degree of, to be honest, contempt for the governing body in the dealing of this matter. It's basically been progressed without any information given to councillors between 2022, when the offer of the grant was made public, and around about the 19th of April. Shocking level of secrecy to the governing body. And Well, to be honest, my inquiries and my requests for information about it were denied, and information about when a motion on this was coming up to council was brushed aside. So I remain personally very, very concerned about the governance around this project.
Thanks, Councillor O'Connor. Councillor Witters.
Yes, there's a really good sentence in this that people need to take note of after the last motion and before this one gets approved, and you knowing that this issue set off a chain reaction on social media. So before people go posting on social media about who won what and who did what, this is what we got given. Take note of the first line in point 3, that subject to the New South Wales Government approvals required in the Transportation Administration Amendment Rail Trails Bill, Council note and agree to the timetable in the New South Wales Public Works project program entailing. Politics is a great game, and if you like me and love it and are a nuffy for it, you can sort of read between the lines of a lot of things. That sentence basically is like you asking mum, can we have McDonald's? And she says, oh, we'll see what dad says. You know, it's, yeah, you can have it, I'll promise the world, but if dad says no, then you're not getting it. And that's basically what the New South Wales government is. And one of the biggest concerns and issues here is public consultation. Now, the New South Wales government, if they're worth their salt, will do due diligence on public consultation, not just one side or the other. They will consult. And as can be seen already, that 3 motions that probably should have taken 20 minutes have taken 3 hours. This is a very divisive issue just in regards to whatever's in here, 50-odd people in here. So if they do their job properly and they come back and say no, then no matter what we put in this motion or whatever gets put in another motion, doesn't happen. So don't get your hopes up and say this, and this, because we're only like stage 1, let's call it. How about that? That seems to be popular around here at the moment. So we'll call it stage 1. So even if this gets up, you've got to remember that the government might just say no. It's been too much of a basket case. We'll just say no and keep things the way that they are. Okay? So don't get too excited. Whether it gets up, gets down, or whatever, there's still a bit of a process to go before anything or anyone can say we won, or this is a silly idea or whatever. Keep your eggs warm and don't count them just yet.
Just to answer, sorry.
Councillor Gillelly.
Thank you. Just to answer Councillor O'Connor's thing, it says here the state government, the consultation involved 2 public consultation sessions, consultation, sorry. I've got my old teeth in. 1 in Tenterfield and 1 in Guyra. Additionally, an invitation for public feedback was issued seeking email or written submissions for those unable to attend the sessions in person. It goes on and on and on, but it's out there. She's not telling the truth. It has been out there for consultation.
Incorrect.
What's incorrect, Councillor O'Connor? Councillor Gadders.
We're good, thanks. I just want to say wise words, Councillor Witters. I totally agree with you. What we do from this point forward is get on with the process. And yes, mum or dad, whoever you choose it to be, the parenting role above us, there is an opportunity that they can knock this back. Until we get on with that process to hopefully tomorrow morning at 8:30, that's something we're not going to know. So you're right. Let's hold fire out on social medias of I won, I lost, all that kind of stuff. That was my point. What I wanted to make is because it has been something that continually comes up, and this is not an attack at anybody on the table, but and especially I know Councillor O'Brien is very key on this, which is the community consultation piece. So I say this for respect of her, which is in the Randani report that we've been served up, page 105, I'm looking at it right now, community engagement actions. There has been 10 different actions, mostly focused around 2021, which walk through the actions that have already been undertaken in terms of community engagement, whether they were sessions held, whether they were markets in the mall, whether they were sessions, in each of the villages or townships along the way. Also social media, also a have you say on the website. So that's the stuff that's been conducted. I want to draw everybody's attention to the next piece, which again is in the documentation that's provided in the project plan, where there is stage 6 community consultation 110 days ahead of us for community consultation as part of this process. So if you don't think you've had, if you weren't part of something back in 2021 or in between, guess what? 110 days coming your way very soon.
Thanks, Councillor Gadders. Councillor O'Connor, you've got something?
Oh, no, just there's several, in fact, numerous errors in, but I'll just point out two on page 2 of this motion. There's a reference to 1.7%. I think it should be 17%. Correct me if I'm wrong, Councillor Robinson.
Yes, should be 17%.
Thank you for the time.
And, well, it's important because it reads 1.7, and then there's references to the Rail Trails Bill 2022. I don't think anybody can rely on a bill, but I think the correct reference should be the Transport Administration Act as it's.
Thank you. Councillor Robinson.
Well, thank you. I mean, I again support exactly what Councillor Widder says. This is a decision to some extent for the New South Wales government. They're the ones in charge of public transport. We should be doing everything we can to get a viable public transport strategy for this area. And I would encourage everybody who has useful information, whether it's on Inland Rail or whether it's Inland Rail is not going to happen, or whether there are alternatives for repurposing the Northern Rail line, to talk to the New South Wales government, because they are the decision makers. All we can say, and all this motion says, is that if the money cannot be repurposed and we do get permission of the New South Wales government, then we should probably spend the money rather than risking having to losing it forever, as we did with the hydrotherapy pool. Thank you.
Councillor McMichael.
My concern, like with Councillor Widders, is the community consultation and with the rail trail framework. I am not sure that we have we've worked with either. And although Councillor Gadders says there's 110 days for community consultation, community consultation isn't just something you bring out of the air and organise. I know that with the LSPS, took a lot of staff time and a lot of staff organisation, and it's not some random thing that just happens. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor McMichael.
I have a question for the mover. When you wrote this proposal, and in regards to actually the Transport Administration Act or Amendment, whatever it is, and they talk about community consultation, because it's a state asset, do they only consult? I haven't read the full act, and I'm hoping that someone has, and maybe Councillor Robertson, you can help me out here. Do they only consult within the local government area of where the state asset is, or because it's a state asset, do they consult the whole state? Is there something within the Act which determines where the consultation is done? And if anyone else has read that, are they able to advise?
Councillor Widders, if I may, I understand that it's incumbent on ARC to consult all neighbouring LGAs. I'm just saying on that part of consultation, and let's be fair, adjudication of whether consultation has happened or not is not going to sit at this table. You can say yes, you can say no, you can say yes, no, it doesn't matter. In the end, the state's going to make that determination. Of course, it's incumbent on council, and like we did with the SRV, maybe you have to get spend funds on a consulting firm to make sure that it's a third party doing all that consultation for us.
to go along with that, does that Act also have a time frame for community consultations? Does it say like the state will conduct community consultations within 6 months, 12 months? Being the state government, it'll probably Neville Rand will get his turn again before anything happens.
The question was directed to the mover, but
I'm pretty certain there isn't a timetable in there. The timetable came from Public Works, and I think the timetable came from having to get the lease within 120 days the next 4 months. Otherwise, the project couldn't go ahead.
thank you. So, with no further debate on the item 12.1, we'll put it to the vote. So those voting for 12.1. Six, and those voting against 12.1. 4, the vote has been 1, and for 12.1. So, at this point in time, if there's no further business, I will declare this extraordinary meeting of council closed at 6:23 p.m.